All right, welcome to God Friend and Me. This is my journey of Is God Real? But we got a special guest today, Will Ramsey. He's a man of God. Following him for a little while on Facebook and listening to his word, and just think he's an amazing man of God, and gone through an amazing journey, and I think he has a great story to tell. So I brought him on today. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Will, and tell them who you are and kind of a little bit of background, if you could.
Absolutely. And first things first, I'm honored to be here, and anything that is coming from me is absolutely coming from God. He gets all the glory. So I appreciate the kind words, Jacob. But I'm Pastor Will Ramsey, or Will Ramsey. Either way, doesn't matter. The title of pastor gets you about 5 cents, and that's about it. It doesn't buy you a thing. But in all seriousness, I have been in the car business for 25 years. I've been a pastor for about 5 years. I'm married to a lovely young lady by the name of Julie, and we've been married 15 years, been together 17 and a half years. And I also have 3 children. And I have 3 children. I have my son Brock, who would have been 31 in May. I have my daughter Marissa, who is 27, just turned 27 in March. And then I have my daughter Madison, who is going to turn 23 in November. I've been on a journey the last 17 months. We lost my son Brock unexpectedly on February 11th, 2020. I got the phone call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I was at work. Actually, I got a message at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to call the police in Wapakoneta, Ohio. And they informed me at 2:15 that my son had passed. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on the last 17 months. I returned just to backtrack a little bit, I returned to Christ. I had stepped away from him for 20 years. I returned to Christ in 2009, 10 time frame, and have been walking that journey ever since. My son had been walking the journey of addiction from the time he was 14 years old. So he had been fighting addiction of some sort, whether it be to pills or to heroin or to whatever it was that he was fighting at that time. He'd been fighting that addiction since he was 14.
Oh,
So for about 15, 16 years, he had been fighting that battle. Been in and out of recovery. He actually didn't talk to me for about 5 years. So it's definitely been an interesting time frame the last 10 years. The enemy has definitely put a target on my family's back and been shooting.
Yeah, I think
description.
Oh, I hear that 100%. I mean, I think that's a good segue into the title of the show today is My Son's Missing. And pretty similar story here as far as, the son goes. He's been struggling. My oldest son, probably since he was about 14, 15. And then right now he's in a mental health hospital currently, and it's just led to all different types of stuff. And it's been a crazy journey. So I know a lot of times through my journey, one of the questions is God real? Which I always known and felt like he was real, but there's always that question of, then if he is real, why are all these things happening? And I thought that's, why it'd be a good reason to bring you in, kind of get your perspective. You're a pastor. Not only that, you're a father. Sometimes we have to take off the hats. Sometimes you're a pastor, but sometimes you have to be dad too.
Absolutely.
And then, sometimes at work you have to be, the boss or whatever else it is. So, I mean, different times it calls for different hats. And I think just the experience of, you being a dad, but now going, being a pastor and everything too, maybe give us a little bit better perspective of, I'm just an average person. I'm not a pastor or preacher. And I know that question is always one of the first questions that come up, in my mind is God real? And if he is, why are all these things happening?
Right.
So,
right. And that's probably an age-old question.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, a lot of people ask that question. A lot of the times the question that we get is, why, if God's real or God cares, usually it's usually it's worded, if God really cares, then why does X happen?
Mm-hmm.
Just fill in the blank. If God, so I'll fill it in for you. If God really cares, then why did your son die?
Yeah.
If he really cares, if he really loves you, Will, why does your son die? Okay. So, I mean, I'm not a theologian by any stretch of the imagination. I am a pastor, but like I said, all that means is that I get to bear a burden that I'm happily want to bear.
Yeah.
So, in my humble opinion, and in what I've gotten from God's word, some of this is opinion, and some of it is coming directly from God's word. If you go to Genesis 3 and read the fall, where Adam and Eve ate the apple, before they ate the apple and went against what God wanted them to do, the world was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We were perfect. We were made perfect. The world was made perfect. We were going to live in perfect harmony with God. They walked about, naked. They didn't worry about anything. They had food, abundant food. They walked in harmony with the animals. Everything was in harmony. Okay. When they went against God's will, which He made it very clear, there's the tree of life. Don't eat of the tree. You can eat of any other fruit in the garden, but don't eat of that fruit. He made that very clear.
Yeah.
Well, then Satan came in and tempted the woman, in which case she succumbed to temptation, brought the man in with it. They both ate the fruit. Well, instantly they realized, hey, we're naked. We're walking around naked. We can see each other's naked. We need to cover up. So they go and grab leaves and they go and hide from God. And God comes looking for them. And when He finds them, He asks them all the questions. Everybody pretty well knows the story. If you don't, I'm shocked, but most people know the story. God asks them where they're at, and God obviously knew where they were at. And it comes out and He says, well, we were naked, so we were hiding from you. And He says, well, why? How do you know you're naked?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that you're naked? Who told you you're naked? And realizes, He knew they ate the fruit. And at that moment, that's when the redemption, not to get off track, but that's when the redemption story came into play, because God tells the woman, your seed will have enmity against him, and talking to the snake, and you'll bite his heel and he'll bruise your head.
Yeah.
That was the story. That was the beginning of the redemption story. He was talking about Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
Because God knew in order to get us back in relationship with Him, He had to give us a way to do that. Okay. But when all that happened, it fractured what God had. When sin entered the world, it fractured how things were supposed to be.
I heard one time that when sin entered the world and when Adam and Eve ate the fruit, is also when death entered. Death isn't natural to us. God didn't create us to die.
100%. He created us to be, that's 100% true, 100% accurate. He created us to be perfect, eternal beings.
Mm-hmm.
So when sin entered the world, so did death.
Yep.
Because he told them, because here's what everybody fails to realize. God told them if they ate of the fruit, they would die. They didn't even know what death was.
Exactly.
They weren't even aware of what death was. So so the way that Satan did it, well, you won't die. That's how he tempted. Well, you're not going to die. Well, no, you're not going to die instantly.
Yeah.
But she couldn't die at all. And now that she ate of the fruit, she absolutely would die.
Well, they made it appealing. They made it, here's this fruit, you can see, be like God. And,
Exactly.
I always say the devil, the enemy is the master counterfeiter. He's not going to sit there and try to give you something that you don't want. He's going to sit there and he's going to know exactly what you're doing when you're doing it, and know the right time to try to get you or hit you or try to take you down, because, he's strategic. He's not, just a dummy walking around, just doing bad things. He knows what he's doing. He's out there to destroy, kill, and,
Right. He's not omnipresent and he's not omniscient, but what Satan does, Satan is not as powerful as God, but he is powerful. So what he does is he has your spreadsheet, he has your rap sheet,
mm-hmm.
he has your stat sheet. He's not everywhere, but he has minions that are around us that hear things.
Yep.
And see things. And the Bible even says we do not fight flesh and blood. We fight principalities and powers, and it's a spiritual warfare. And if you don't think that it is, you're fooling yourself.
Oh, and that's one of the things I'm realizing even more, lately is, like I shared with you the other day on Wednesday. I wasn't feeling too good. I think Monday or Tuesday, and it must have been Monday because Monday evening, because I was listening to your Monday morning with Will, and
right.
The crazy thing is, you gave me the word earlier. You're telling me it's the same devil, but a new you,
Right.
and then a new you in Christ, new you, in God. And I was sitting there and I wasn't feeling good. I was like, man, this is the same old devil. And then boom, I just pretty much told him in Jesus' name he's not welcome. But then I also had to just kind of talk with God for a while too. All of a sudden I felt better. Everything was good. And then I was realizing maybe this isn't as much just my physical body. Maybe it's more a spiritual battle that we're fighting, that we have to battle. So
absolutely.
And it's crazy. And the crazy thing is, I watch a lot of different videos and big, huge, crazy, mega church pastors and stuff. And the word that I got that helped me battle the thing was from, some little guy, the word of Will on Monday morning. So,
well, I appreciate that. And God can use anybody. And the thing of it is, for a long answer to a short question is, is that you ask me why do these things happen? It's because sin entered the world and separated us from God. Okay, so God does care. He is real. He does watch over us. If you look at your life, I can point out 20 things probably over the last, and that's just that I can think. I don't know that I can think of all 20, but I can point out, just talking, 20 things that happened over the last 10 years that I'd say that's God. It's 100% God. And there's no way that would have happened had God not been intervened. And on the same hand, before that, before I was walking with God, what people don't realize is that, there's a verse that says the wages of sin are death. Okay. Mm-hmm. What they don't understand, what those wages are the consequences of our sin. The wages of sin are death, is death. Wow. Death, there's two types of death. There's spiritual death and there's physical death. Okay. The spiritual death is what the consequences of sin cause, is spiritual death. They can also cause physical death. Okay. Your consequences of your actions are the wages of sin.
Wow.
Okay. So I walked through, I had a pastor that told me something that has stuck with me. He told me this about 3 years after I gave my heart back to Christ. I gave my heart back to Christ back in 10, and in 13 I was sitting with him. I was actually sitting with him with Brock, because Brock was trying to get clean, and so Brock wanted to get into a program, and we're sitting with this pastor, and we were kind of talking about different things, and he said, Will, here's what you don't realize. You've just given your heart back to Christ in the last few years. You walked for 20 years with the enemy. And that's accurate. You walked for 20 years with the enemy. So all of the consequences, the wages, if you will, of you walking with the enemy for 20 years, you still have that residual. So you're walking through fields of consequences. That's what he called it, into fields of blessings. So what's happening is these two fields are meeting, but there's still things that you're going to walk through that are going to meet with the fields of blessings. The consequences are going to get less and less because you're walking away from that life. You're stepping away from those things that you used to do into things that you do now. But the residual, the wages of sin, will still be around, and there might. And here's the thing that people don't realize or remember. Whatever that was that you did. I serve with a pastor named Doug Wampler at Engage City Church, and one of the things he says is one time can lead to a lifetime. That's one of the things that he says. So something that you do because he was a teen pastor and he used to tell this to teens all the time. One time, you have sex one time. Well, what could happen? girl get pregnant.
Pregnant.
One time can lead to a lifetime.
Yep.
Because now you're taking care of a kid for a lifetime.
Or sexual transmitted diseases or something else. Yep.
Exactly. But exactly, that's my point. So the thing of it is whatever you've done when you're young, if you're not walking with Jesus, whatever that thing was can change the course of your life, because you have free will. God gave us free will.
Mm-hmm.
He gave us the free will to do whatever we want to do. We have the choice we can choose. We can choose the enemy, and you don't wake up in the morning and go, yeah, I'm going to serve the devil today. That's not what you're doing. But if you're not serving God, guess who you're serving?
Yep, exactly.
If you're not choosing Jesus, you're choosing the other, whether you know it or not. It's a choice.
Yep.
Right? So these consequences, these wages, over time, hopefully when you've chosen Christ, get less and less.
I also think it's also part of your mindset and your way that you just like conditioned yourself to think and eat and everything, to where a lot of times when you're kind of doing more God's will, everything kind of feels wrong because it's not worldly. I mean, for me to believe in an invisible, God who I can't technically see, which when your eyes start getting open, you can clearly see. But I mean, when you're, first starting to believe, or maybe you're still trying to, maybe addicted or coming out of addiction or something. I mean, it's a real blurry everything. I mean, everything's confusing.
Right.
And then sometimes it takes a while to get clear. Sometimes you got to realize some of these people have done drugs every day, a lot of them for 4 or 5, 10 years. And it's not like their mind's just going to be clear and all of a sudden they're just going to think, oh, all right, well, the good news is God does restore, he does renew, and, he does give us the new life within him. And I think, as hard and as quite quick as you want to go, I think he's willing to go there with you. I was watching this video one time and I heard this pastor talking, and it didn't really make too much sense to me. I just heard him say, when Jesus was going to the wilderness or the desert, by the devil or whatever, he was led by the Spirit. And I kind of thought it said the same thing, but it said after he resisted the temptation was coming out, he actually walked in the Spirit. But I didn't really catch the difference until I actually listened to it over and over and over, that a lot of times he's going to lead us through these things, but after we resist that temptation and make it through, it actually said that he filled them with the Spirit. Now you're filled with the Spirit, everything's a little bit different, but sometimes it takes a little while to fill up. And God, I think, is the good thing is sometimes he does speed us up, but a lot of times he is kind of going your pace. Even if you think, why did you do this or that? Sometimes things have to happen in our life for us to make changes. We could sit there and say every day, I want to change this, I want to do this, I want to do that. People do it every year with New Year's resolutions or, diets or whatever. I want to do this, but how many of them actually follow through with it?
Right.
So, I mean, it takes some consistency, it takes patience, it takes everything else, but at the end of the day, if you have that will and, you give it to God, I think pretty much anything is definitely possible. And I know because I've been doing it myself. I'm walking through it currently. So, but yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about addiction some, and then some about your son, because I feel like maybe the people that I could reach are potentially the ones that are thinking about becoming, or thinking maybe, is God real? Or maybe they've been on drugs for a while and, they, kind of want to hear a different perspective. Because I feel somebody told me, and it kind of hit me hard a little bit, because somebody told me one time a couple years ago, a hero, if one person saves 5 people, that's a hero. But what do you call it when, one person takes down 5 people, or a family, or a whole community, or whatever? And he told me that's addiction. So pretty much willing to sacrifice everything. I mean, with my son, I've been through it all, from being hit, chased with a knife, windows being kicked out, horrible things said, to even like visiting him in the hospitals, and then telling me I can't come back the next day because he was telling them that the voices were telling him to kill me and all types of stuff. So I mean, us as fathers and dads trying to, deal with this, and then you losing your son. I mean, it's tough. It's hard, and I mean, I've seen people go through programs and try different things and be sent off to different countries to try. I've heard of all different types of stuff. People trying opioids and eating some mushroom or some tea in Mexico, or I don't know, to try to get off drugs. But the one thing is, I feel is, you could keep trying to fill an empty bottle, but if there's a living water or something that's going to keep getting filled no matter what, I think we need to make sure people know what that is. And I feel like that's God, and I feel like he's the only one who could truly defeat whatever you're going through. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's sadness or addiction or loss or confusion. I feel like he's the only one who could probably really give us clarity to it. So maybe you could talk on that a little bit and just share your story about your son a little bit more too.
Absolutely. So Brock was, so just to tell you a little bit about Brock was struggled with addiction, like I said, till he was, from the time he was 14 years old. The struggle became a lot stronger. His mother passed in 2013. She was a drug addict as well. And she and I hadn't been together for 20 years, but she was addicted to pills and then graduated to heroin, and had driven to another town to get it, and was on the way back and fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the yellow line and hit somebody head on, and it killed her instantly.
Oh, jeez.
And that was December 20th of 2013. And Brock was very, very, very close to his mother. That was his. She raised him until he was 7. We were divorced, and she got pregnant at a very young age, single mom. So he lived with her. It's not that I wasn't around. I went to the military, and we had tried to make things work. She tried to come down with me, and it didn't work out. She moved back in with her family. We stayed in touch, and I saw him when I could. And then when I got out, we tried to get back together. It's a long, convoluted story. I don't want to tie things up here with that. But at the end of the day, it caused his addiction to be stronger. Okay. So in the meantime, I had been in Iowa and came back. He had almost died in 2012 from a drug overdose, and God saw fit to heal him. Well, then a year later, he calls me, and this is actually after his mother passed. He calls me. He was living with his uncle. He called me and asked me if he could move in with me, and he was living with me when all this happened, and he ended up getting saved. And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit when you were talking about, the cup can be filled, absolutely. That doesn't necessarily mean the addiction is going to go away, and I know that's hard to hear, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Brock was saved, sanctified, gave his heart to Christ. I was there when he prayed. I was there when he confessed it. He told me he wanted to get saved. I mean, he came out of his mouth. But the problem is that he had an anoxic brain injury that from 2012, where he had overdosed, aspirated, and been without oxygen for an indeterminate amount of time.
Oh, wow.
And so he actually spent 30 days in the hospital. He spent 15 days in ICU. And then when he got out of ICU, they sent him to what's the physical therapy, where they have to teach him how to walk again and talk again and all that stuff. Occupational therapy. He had to go to occupational therapy for about 2 months to learn how to talk, walk, and do all that again.
Wow.
So he wasn't even supposed. That's what I'm saying. He wasn't even supposed to be here. I mean, the doctor showed me his brain scan. His brain was dead. He wasn't responding. He wasn't. I mean, he was a walking, talking, living miracle. I got a walking, talking, living miracle for 8 years. He was healed in 2012. Gave his heart to Christ on January 20th of 2013, and then walked through this addiction issue You know, the problem is that the devil knew how to get my son, and the way he knew how to get him is when his mother passed. He went off the deep end. He had a real struggle with heroin after his mother passed. I mean, it was terrible. And he would live with me to try and save money, supposedly, to get back on track. And all I was doing was enabling him. And so what ended up having to happen is he overdosed in my house, in my arms. He almost died.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll tell the story real quick. Julie and I, he got home from work. He was getting cleaned up. He had a really good job. He was getting cleaned up. He was getting ready to go downstairs. His bedroom was downstairs in the basement. He looks at us and he goes, "Hey, I'm headed down to bed." I'm like, "Okay, good night, son. We love you." Night. And we're sitting there watching television. We got DVR. And Julie, my wife, she's sitting next to me on the couch. She goes, "What's that noise?" So I pause it and I'm like, "I don't hear anything." She's like, "No, I heard a noise. Something's going on." And I said, "Well, okay." So I started the show again. He heard it again. I still didn't hear it. She says, "Pause that. Something's going on." So I paused it. Still didn't hear it. She's like, "Go check on Brock." So I walked to the top of the steps. I look down and his head's resting on his chest like he's asleep. So I called his name. I said, "Brock." Didn't move. Thought maybe he was sound asleep. I said, "Brock." Didn't move. Well, then I used my dad voice, because that usually makes my kids jump, even as adults. You know, my daughter will say she's triggered if I use that voice. I'm triggered, Dad. So I used my dad voice. He didn't even stir. He didn't move.
Geez.
So I knew there was a problem. I yelled back at her, called 911. I went down there. He was turning blue.
Oh.
Yeah. Pulled him down on the floor, and I'm sitting here smacking on his chest, smacking his face, calling his name. I didn't know how to do CPR, so that's all I knew how to do. Rubbing his chest, smacking it. "Son, wake up, wake up." You know, he's turning blue. He's turning cold. And a sheriff, Warren County Sheriff, was walking down the steps, and the ambulance was just pulling in the driveway, and all of a sudden he popped up like he'd been hit with Narcan. And I didn't have anything. I didn't, he just all of a sudden just popped away like he'd been hit with a shot of Narcan.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. There was no reason he should have woke up. There's no reason the boy should have been alive as many times as he was alive, because he literally overdosed 2 weeks later. I told him he had to leave. He couldn't stay with me. I took him up to, they have what's called the ARC program, which is part of the Salvation Army. He went through that program once before. I took him up there and tried to get him to go in there. He wasn't there 2 days, and they kicked him out because he had walked in stoned. They kicked him out. And so he calls me up, and you're talking about your son, not wanting to see you and telling you crazy things. So he calls me up after he gets kicked out. He's sitting on the curb. Calls me up and, "Hey, just want to let you know I got kicked out. I didn't do anything. They just kicked me out." I'm like, "Well, son, you must have done something." He's like, "Well, I don't know what to do. What are we going to do?" I said, "What do you mean, what are we going to do?" He said, "Well, what are we going to do?" "I don't know what you're going to do." I said, "You can't come back here, son. You have to get clean." "Well, I'm clean." I said, "Son," and that was the hardest thing. I'll just be honest. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is tell my son I wouldn't help him. I just, to tell him that that I wouldn't help him, because I wasn't helping him. I was enabling him. So I had to tell him that I couldn't help him. And then he ended up going to somebody's house, and I don't know if it was that night or a few nights later, he overdosed again, almost died. They Narcaned him 6 times to wake him up. And they got him into a program down in Middletown, Ohio, called the Hope House. And he was there for 6 or 8 months, and they helped him get a job, helped him get an apartment. In the meantime, he met a girl, and things seemed to be going well. He was clean for about a year. They were going to meetings, and it's just the problem with heroin is it changes your chemical makeup in your brain, and it never goes away. So that craving is always there, and especially if you fight depression or if you fight um, self-worth. If you have self-worth issues, the enemy plays on that.
I almost feel
And
like everybody has those issues too, somewhat or another, in some way.
Well, and one thing that I want to get out while we're talking about addiction, and I think this is very important. We have an addiction program in my church called City Recovery. The church is Engaged City Church, and we have an addiction program that meets every Friday night from 7 to 9, intentionally, because that's usually the party time.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going to party, you come to recovery, and sit. It's a biblical recovery program. But one of the things, and I'm one of the spiritual advisors, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that was brought out in that recovery program, because I don't think it's talked about enough, is the importance of the person. The importance of the person.
They're just not part of a program. They're just not a number.
They're not a project. They're not a project. The sobriety is a means that you have to develop the person. You know, you want them to be sober, but in the meantime, you want them to understand that they are important as a person. They are a living, breathing soul. They are a child of God. And that we want them to be sober so that they can have a good relationship with Jesus Christ, and that they are important, not only to us, but to the King. And that needs to be conveyed. And a lot of times the importance of the person is not conveyed. It's all about the sobriety. Sobriety is important. Don't get me wrong. It has to be important to that person. But the thing of it is, the sobriety has to be made important to the person, but the person has to be made to feel that they are important. Not that the sobriety is more important than the person.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, even with our son, I feel like sometimes we just try to put a Band-Aid on whatever. It wasn't even really, just because there's always so much going on. I mean, you know, he's one of 4 boys, and we still have the rest of our family, and it seemed like a lot of times we were just trying to put on a Band-Aid, and we forget that they're people, and yeah, we do want them to be clean, and we do want them to stop doing the things they're doing, and, you know, stop being the way they're being. But at the same time, you know, we have to make sure that we're putting worth on them too, and putting value on them. And
exactly.
Because at the end of the day, that's why we're putting in all that work, right? Because we do see value in them. They are valuable to us. They're our kids. But at the same time, as parents, sometimes I guess, you know, we forget, because we get caught up in the moment of, hey, maybe that's not what I'm doing. Maybe I need to show a little bit more love and not just think about so much doing this and that, and, you know.
Well, the other thing that people don't realize, and I want to get this out too, you know, my whole perspective changed. You know, I'll admit it. I was one of those ones. I dealt with my former wife when we were young, and I'm the one that found out she was an addict. So, you know, so it's not blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh, and bone of my bone, because we actually weren't married at that point. We had been divorced and we're trying to get back together. And I found out she was an addict. Brock was very young. He was only 9 years old. So in my mind, I've got a dirty, lying drug addict that was my wife. Okay, do you hear what I said?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, fast forward, you know, however many years later, now it's my son. It's not my wife. It's bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He's my son. Is he still a dirty, rotten drug addict? See what I mean? You know what I mean? Your perspective, it's all about perspective. And so you got to stop and think and look, you know, these are people that are dealing with a chemical problem. And the issue is and I know it sounds cliche, but you don't wake up one day and go, you know what, I'm going to go be a drug addict.
Yeah.
That's not how it happens. You decide to use something for whatever reason, just like I drank. I drank for years, drank like a fish. You know, it wasn't a physical addiction, it was a mental addiction. I had an excuse for every time I drank. When we were going to celebrate something, I was upset about something. I mean, I didn't need a reason to drink. Okay?
Yeah.
I just drank. I wanted to escape reality. And that's what it's about. It's escapism. Okay? You don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to go be a drug addict. I'm gonna go lie, cheat, steal my family, and make everybody feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
You don't wake up one day and do that. What happens is you go and try something as chemically unstable as heroin or fentanyl. Fentanyl is what killed my boy.
Mm-hmm.
Or you try something like that, and what happens, it changes your chemical makeup in your brain. And the next thing you know, you can't do anything but think about that. That's all you think about. That's it.
And a lot of times these things that they're putting in, they're actual chemicals. I mean, it's not like you're just saying it's changing the chemical compound of your body. I mean, they're actually chemicals that you're putting into your body. Look at what a lot of these heroines and crystal and coke and, all these things actually have in them. They're chemicals. They're not, something good, that a nutrient or a vitamin that you're putting into your body. It's a straight chemical. Some of the stuff is, I think acid is rat poison or something like that.
Right.
I mean, think about that. You're actually killing yourself slowly, and that's why you're hallucinating and seeing those things. It's not because it's a cool drug and pill. It's because you're poisoning your brain, and it's kind of dying and thinking it's dying, so you're hallucinating.
Fentanyl is an animal tranquilizer. That's what fentanyl is.
Wow.
Fentanyl is an animal tranquilizer. And the thing of it is, there's a guy out there, and I need to find out who he is. There's a guy in Ohio that son died by touching it. He wasn't even using it; he just touched it. And he wants to make it so. And I'd love to hook up with this guy. He wants to make it a weapon of mass destruction.
Oh, it is. It's killing.
Because it's literally, if you take a penny, and I don't remember exactly what it is on Abraham's head, that if you take the amount of the size of something, not on the size of Abraham Lincoln's head, it's something on his head, on a penny, will kill you.
Wow.
That's how deadly it is.
Wow.
That's how deadly it is. And there are dealers out there that are cutting heroin and now it's other drugs. It's not just heroin, it's meth, it's pot, it's cocaine, it's all of it. There are dealers out there that are cutting their drugs with this terrible, terrible thing. Okay? And this is the enemy. Make no mistake. This is the enemy. We are fighting a battle of spiritual proportion. It's not, we can sit here and talk about, drug dealers and all that all you want, but it's the enemy.
Oh, absolutely. The battle's not between flesh and bone or whatever.
Right. So the thing of it is this drug is so massively terrible, and this is what killed my son. That's what killed him. And the addiction scheme of it is when you're a parent, you're dealing with an addicted child, and then you lose that child, or that child becomes disabled, or whatever the case is, because sometimes they don't die, sometimes they become brain dead. Or it's not always a situation where that child is dead. That there's something that happens to them where maybe they can't function correctly, maybe they can't talk, they become disabled, or they die. But you've still lost your child. You've lost your child.
Oh, absolutely.
He's in a mental hospital.
Yeah, my son, he's in a mental hospital. He hears voices. I mean, the medications and the things they do for him, have different doctors giving him different pills of different things, and everybody doesn't even know what he's doing half the time, and he hears voices and everything else. And unfortunately, I've even heard my wife say, and it's kind of sad to say, but sometimes it almost would have been easier if he would have died, because he got hit by a car, because he hears voices and he'll take off. He got hit by a car going 50 miles an hour, and he was just walking, and luckily God saved his life and spared him. But I've heard my wife say before, it almost would have been easier if he died, which kills me to even think of or to even hear. When I heard that,
I would painfully disagree with her.
Oh, I know, but just sometimes.
I understand what she's saying. I get it. I get it. And believe me when I tell you, there was plenty of times, where I didn't know where Brock was. I'll give you an example. So, his girlfriend, not the one that he was with when he passed, but the previous one that has my grandson, she was pregnant with him. I just started a new job in the car business, and I was just getting off work. It was a Sunday, and I'd only been there, I think, a week, maybe two. and I get a phone call from him. He says, "Hey, Dad, I need you to come pick me up." I said, "Pick you up? What's the matter with your car?" "It's just in a wreck."
Oh, jeez.
"Okay, well, where are you at?" I'm on Galbraith and Mitchell. This is in downtown, almost downtown Cincinnati. So I live in Dayton. So to give you perspective, that's like driving from Austin to San Antonio.
All right.
To give you some perspective on that, so it's about a from where I live, it's about a 45-minute to an hour drive.
All right.
Okay. So he's wrecked his car an hour away. Okay. What I don't know is that his girlfriend is in the hospital in labor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm driving down there to go get him. When I get to him, I said, "What were you doing down here?" "Well, I was picking a friend up, da-da-da." "No, he's down there to get drugs." He told me that later. He's down there to get drugs. And see, this goes back to that wages of sin is death. He was down there doing something that he knew he wasn't supposed to be doing. He knew full well that he shouldn't be doing it. Okay. He was doing it anyway. Was driving through a light, and a lady ran the light and hit him. Now, he was saved when this happened. Okay. So I mean, you want to ask if there was a God? Well, he didn't get to use the drugs. Okay. The car was totaled. Couldn't drive the car. Calls me. I go down there and get him. He doesn't admit to me what's going on. We're driving back up. So I live back up this direction. So we drive back. We're driving home. I'm thinking that we're driving to Marion, where his girlfriend is from, to go be there when because she was an addict too, to go be there when my grandson's born. Well, come to find out, she's in the opposite direction. I could have left from where I picked him up at and went straight to where they were at. I drove 45 minutes the other direction north away, and I don't find out until we pull in the driveway. He goes, "There's something I need to tell you." I said, "What's that?" He goes, Wendy's in Portsmouth, Ohio." I said, "So why didn't you tell me that when I was picking you up in Cincinnati?"
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's just these crazy things that happened, that you just want to strangle them. You're just like, dude, really? Come on.
Oh, yeah. I hear that. I mean, I slept on staircases and put baby gates up to try to keep our, adult kid from taking off in the middle of the night and doing crazy stuff.
What?
And I mean, we used to have
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard, bro.
Yeah, and the cops coming over, the mental health cops coming over every 2-3 nights, and I mean,
So how long has he been in that hospital?
Since probably 4 or 5 months before COVID started.
Wow.
Yeah. But
what is the prognosis that they're saying?
Well, it's a couple different things. So part of it is he was, doing drugs hard for a while, from probably like 14 to 19 or something. Kind of on the streets, on and off, and going between places. And then he eventually got hit by the car, probably when he was like 19 or whatever. And then it became multiple things. So it wasn't just one issue. It wasn't just getting him off drugs. Now we had to deal with PTSD. Now we had to deal with brain injury, and then you have to deal with the addiction and everything too. So
right.
And then now it's just he hears voices and all different types of things. So I mean, it's not just one thing. It adds up, and it just compiles into multiple things. So
right.
But as hard as it was, the one thing I could tell you is he is the one who has brought me closer to God, and really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I've been there praying and praying and praying for him, and I mean, things have just happened which there's no other explanation except God. I mean,
absolutely.
He's in and out of rehabs. No rehab would take him, just because whatever his mental health was, too bad just to be in a rehab or whatever. He needed to be somewhere, a different facility or something else. They would take our money, they would take our other stuff and try to kick him out a couple days or a week later. And eventually we ran into this church down here. And I'll tell you, to be honest, I judged them. I've seen them before. They go on the streets and they do fundraising, like pretty much panhandle if you want to, just be real. It's, they'll go out and they call it fundraising, but that's actually how they support all their houses. That's how they eat. That's how they get clothes for the babies. And what they also do is when they're on the streets, they do a thing called fishing, which they'll find other people that are living on the streets and addicted to drugs or whatever, and they'll bring them in and help them get clean and everything. It's a free 9-month program, and they actually let our son come in, and they had, a lot of different rules. You can't smoke, you can't do this or that. You couldn't take off, you had to stay within the program. And he would take off a lot, and they would actually go get him and bring him back, and they'd show him a lot of love. And I mean, these are people I judged like a lot. And then eventually to see my son, I had to start going to like either the men's group or church on Sunday there too, which is not a normal church. It's strictly almost like homeless people and people that are hard for other people to love. Trust me, nobody else probably really wants to deal with these people. And they're the ones pulling them in and trying to get them back on their feet and everything. So, it just really opened my eyes to a lot of things. First of all, I had a hardened heart and I judged them so quick and easy. When I saw them before in the streets, panhandlers, those aren't people of God. We're people of God, not those people, easily judged them. And then going to the church, there's this one lady that kind of annoyed me. She's a white lady, and she'd throw her hands up. And it's like, honestly, like, I probably should have not have judged her, and I'd sit there and like, oh my God. But she was the nicest lady. It's just like, she kind of annoyed me. I don't know why. And one day we had to transition my son from what they call this hotel place down in Austin, or they call it the Inn actually. And it's a mental health facility that you could check yourself into if there's a place available or whatever. So my son was there, and they gave him a place for a couple weeks, and one of his social worker guys had found him another place where he could go kind of off Lamar, which is kind of a bad street, certain parts of it in Austin. But so I went to drop him off. His mom took the other boys, and they were going on vacation or something, and it just happened to be the day of the transition, and she always pretty much did everything with Mike as far as that stuff. I'd go visit him, bring him food, hang out with him, but like if it was something that he actually needed to do, or something he had to talk to a lawyer or somebody about, he always had his mom, because he didn't really trust that many other people and never really felt comfortable around them. So we did the transition thing. I dropped him off, checked him in, but one thing you have to realize as a parent, once your kid turns 18, like, it's hard to do anything for them because they're an adult. Like, you try to check them into a hospital or call and get information about them. I mean, HIPAA laws and all this other stuff, like, you are kind of like lost. Luckily we had a social worker and other people that we worked with that would kind of keep us updated on stuff and his, wellness and everything. But he had taken off from that facility I had tried to check him into, and my wife called me up, and she's telling me this and that, and Mike took off, and I have to go find him and search for him. And I went all day long just cruising up and down every street you could think of, trying to find him, trying to figure out where he was, tried everything I could think of. And his mom, I thought had called the church and told them, hey, keep an eye out for Mikey, but I guess they didn't have a chance to tell anybody or anything. But it was getting later on in the evening, and it was a Tuesday, and that's when the men's group was. So I was like, I'm going to go to men's group. Possibly, maybe he'd be there. I really doubt it, but because where I dropped him off to where the church was kind of far. But it's like, I'm just going to go in anyways, pray, and then maybe see if the pastors or somebody could help me out.
Right.
Went there, and then as soon as I walked in, Pastor Ira, one of the pastors there, looked at me, and his eyes got all big, and he said, oh my gosh, he's right here. I looked at him, I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, Lori's on the phone, and she's with Mikey right now off Lamar. I was like, what? And then I asked him, like, eventually just kind of like, I was like, can you ask her if I could go down there, pick them up, if she could stay with them, blah, blah, blah. He's all, hey, Laura, you think you could stay with them and do this and that? She's all, yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, that was one of the craziest things. I was like, wow, right when I walk in, God's like, boom, here he is. And then I go down there, and the Laura lady is the one that I was telling you that I judged, didn't really think that much of. She was like too bubbly and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, like, and she was the one, and I like honestly, my heart, like honestly, I like started to cry, I couldn't breathe. God just filled me. And then she started telling me her stories that 2 or 3 days before, somebody in one of the houses stole all her rings, her wallet, her ID, her money, everything she had. So she had to go back down to the DMV or whatever, grab a new ID. And that's the only reason she was there, or she would have been out, you know, with the groups or whatever. She said she started to walk the other way, and as soon as she started to walk the way that she was going to the bus stop, she heard a voice that told her, go the other way. She said it didn't really make sense to her because she said that she would have saved 2 or 3 stops by going the other way, 20, 30 minutes. And then as soon as she went to where the other bus stop, she saw my son. And then she called up the pastors right away. It's like, hey, I got him. But she said, this was the crazy part when I was talking to her, she said she had called twice, and the pastor Ira didn't pick up. And then on the 3rd time she called Roderick, and on the 3rd time they picked up. And then that was right when I walked in the door. I was like, wow. That's 3 calls, and then boom, right there. And then, I mean, it is just mind blowing. My whole concept, first of these people, judging them on the street, thinking, these aren't people of God. We're people of God. Those are panhandlers, and those are, you know, whatever, just trying to use God's name. Then to find out about the program, to really see what these people are about. Then the one person I really judged, like this lady in there, then for her to be the one who found my son, I mean, it's crazy, man. I mean,
that's amazing.
It is. All God's work, man. All God's work.
And here's the answer to your question early when we started this whole thing. Is God real? Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What you just told me is all God. You know, and I don't believe in coincidences. I never have, especially now. I've seen too many things where it should have went another way, and it didn't. You know, I've seen, you know, Romans 8:28 says, God works all things for good for those that love him who are called according to his purpose. Not all things are good. He works all things for good. Okay? So he didn't plan for Brock to die. He didn't plan for Mike to be in where he's at.
Yeah.
But there are things that are coming out of those things that are good. The situations themselves are not good by any stretch of the imagination. Okay? But there are things that are going to happen and are going to occur that God is going to use for good. This podcast being one of them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely agreed.
I've seen people get saved from things that have been talked about Brock. I have seen people watch my morning word with Will that they don't ever say anything, but then I'll get a message or somebody will walk up to me, or I'll be on the phone with somebody talking to him. You know, there's a guy that I know that I talk to him, and he's like, and he's in my business, and I've known him for 20 years, and just would never thought that for any reason he would have watched my show. And all of a sudden he comes out and he says, man, he goes, you know what? He goes, I really enjoy your morning, that morning thing you do. He didn't even say it, but the name of it. He said, that morning thing you do, you know, every other morning, I really enjoy that. I really enjoy watching that. And it just, I mean, and I get that kind of stuff all the time. And it's not for me. I'm not doing it. It's God doing it. Yeah. I'm just doing what God told me to do. And I'm real careful to take any glory for any of that, because I'm telling you, the way that came about, it was the day after my son's funeral at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And I didn't want to do it. I fought with God for 15 minutes over it, not wanting to do it. He said, you need to do a Facebook Live. And I said, no, I don't. I don't want to do that. And we argued for 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then obviously I gave in. Because 3 years ago, I wouldn't do it. You couldn't get me to do a Facebook Live if you asked me to. I was terrified. I didn't want to do a Facebook Live. And the last thing I want to do was a Facebook Live the day after my son's funeral.
Wow. If
And
you
now
think
I've
about
done
it, we're both here right now.
224 episodes.
How many? You're on 200 and what?
Today was 224.
224. Wow. That is amazing, man. Think about it. All because of your son. Think about that. We're both on this show right now and talking about how good God is because of our sons and their addictions.
Yep. Amen.
Amen to that. I think we're going to wrap it up for now. I'm definitely going to have you on again. I think we're right around an hour right now. So
honored.
Definitely a pleasure. I appreciate you just sharing your story. And I mean,
you too, brother.
Yeah, so much good stuff. And I look forward to hearing from you again. And do you have anywhere anybody could check it out? Whether they go Will Ramsey on Facebook to check out your live, or do you do it on Zoom too? Or
I do it on Facebook Live. It's called The Morning Word with Will.
All right.
I do it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6:30 in the morning.
I'll leave a couple links on there. I know he's in a couple different Bible study groups too, so we'll grab some links and throw them in the description just so you guys could check it out.
And then I also run a Facebook group, and I'm going to get you in it if I don't haven't already. It's called Focus Forward, #Focus Forward.
Yep, and we'll put that link in there. I am in it, and I'll definitely put the link to that in there too. I think that does your that Morning with Will too, right?
Yeah, I put that on there. So just real quick, the big reason for that group is because I spent 8 or 9 months in a very deep, dark hole, and God gave me my phrase for 2021, which was #Focus Forward.
Love it.
To focus forward on what God has in front of us, and to stop looking over your shoulder and lingering at what was behind us or what we might have lost or what we might have left behind. So it's to focus forward. The reason it's #Focus Forward is we got to focus forward on what's in front of us and what God has for us. So
Amen to that.
The whole point of that. So yes, sir.
I love it, man. Well, definitely a pleasure, and I look forward to the next episode, and we'll go from there.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
All right, buddy. You too.